Jonathan had always been a reserved man. Living alone in the old family house after his mother passed away years ago, he found comfort in the quiet solitude. The house, a creaky, two-story colonial structure, sat at the edge of a forest. It was picturesque during the day, but unsettling at night. One rainy evening, Jonathan was sitting in the dimly lit living room. The sound of raindrops tapping against the window panes mixed with the occasional rumble of thunder. He had just finished dinner and was engrossed in an old book when he heard it. A faint knock at the front door. Who could that be at this hour? He muttered to himself. He approached the door cautiously, peering through the peephole. To his shock, standing there was his mother, her pale face smiling gently, just as he remembered her. She was wearing the floral dress she always loved. Jonathan froze. His heart pounded in his chest. His mother had died 3 years ago. "Jonathan," she called softly, her voice muffled by the rain. "It's me. Open the door, sweetheart." His legs felt like lead. Rationality screamed at him to stay away, but something deeper, a longing perhaps, urged him to open the door. Slowly, he unlocked it and swung it open. There she was, looking exactly as she had before her death. She stepped inside, dripping water onto the floor, and smiled. "Mom?" Jonathan stammered. How are you here?" "I've missed you," she said, her tone warm and familiar. "I've come back to take care of you." Jonathan felt a chill despite the warmth of her words. Something about her presence felt off. Her eyes, while kind, seemed darker than he remembered, almost hollow, and her movements were too fluid, as if she were gliding rather than walking. "You're not real," he whispered, stepping back. She tilted her head and chuckled softly. "Oh, Jonathan, is that any way to greet your mother?" Her voice shifted, a subtle undertone of menace creeping in. Jonathan's instincts screamed at him to run, but his feet refused to move. "Why don't we sit down, just like old times?" she said, gesturing toward the living room. Jonathan nodded mechanically, unable to defy her. They sat opposite each other, the dim light casting eerie shadows on her face. "How have you been?" she asked, her voice calm but unnervingly hollow. "I've been fine," he managed to say, his throat dry. "Good," she said, her smile widening too much, stretching unnaturally across her face. Jonathan's fear deepened. He noticed something horrifying, her hands. They weren't human. They were claw-like, with elongated fingers ending in sharp black nails. "Mom," he said, his voice trembling. "What are you?" The smile vanished. Her face twisted into something grotesque, her eyes glowing faintly red. "I'm here for you, Jonathan," she hissed. "You called me. Don't you remember?" Jonathan's mind raced. He had been feeling lonely, wishing for company. But had his longing somehow summoned this? "I didn't mean to," he yelled, standing up abruptly. "You can't escape me," she said, her voice echoing unnaturally. Her body contorted, stretching and cracking as she rose from her seat. Jonathan bolted toward the door, but it slammed shut on its own. The windows rattled violently, and the lights flickered. "Stay with me, Jonathan," the creature said, now fully transformed. Its face was a horrifying blend of his mother's and something demonic, with a gaping mouth filled with jagged teeth. Desperation took over. Jonathan grabbed the fireplace poker and swung it wildly as the creature lunged at him. He missed, and the thing let out a blood-curdling scream that echoed through the house. Suddenly, the room went dark. The creature's glowing eyes were the only source of light, coming closer and closer. Jonathan screamed, and everything went black. When he woke up, the house was silent. The rain had stopped, and the morning sun streamed through the windows. He was lying on the floor of the living room, the fireplace poker still clutched in his hand. The door was wide open, but there was no sign of the creature, just a faint smell of decay lingering in the air. Jonathan never stayed in the house after that night. He packed his belongings and left, never looking back. But even years later, in his new home far away, he would sometimes hear a faint knock at the door, followed by a familiar voice calling, "Jonathan, let me in."